Hi, everyone. I'm Rachael Nemeth. Today on Back to Basics, I'm sitting down with someone who's operated nearly every side of the franchisor organization. Jenna Henderson has spent over 2 decades inside franchise systems. She rose up through Saladworks, over 14 years in roles spanning brand services, development, growth, stepping into tech as COO of WorkMerk, where she helped build the ServSafe Ops platform, then leading Taproom before taking on the COO role at Great Harvest Franchising, part of NewSpring Capital's portfolio. What I really appreciate about Jenna is that she represents what the modern franchisor leader looks like: cross-functional, operated-minded, brand-forward, tech-fluent, and her experience gives her a really rare perspective on how franchisor models actually need to evolve to support today's franchisees. So Jenna, can you just introduce yourself and just share the scope of your role at Great Harvest today?
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. So my background, which we talked a little bit about, is in operations. And I will say, and you'll probably hear me talk a lot about it this morning, but I think operations is the heart and soul and lifeblood of restaurant, hospitality, candidly, any
Completely
business.
agree.
It's where my heart and soul lies. And so in my current role, I am Group Chief Operating Officer for NewSpring Franchise. There are 7 brands under the umbrella. 3 of those are food brands that I oversee: operations, marketing, supply chain, and sit on the leadership team. And those are Great Harvest Bakery Cafe, with about 156 units based out of Montana, Duck Donuts with about 150 units based out of Hershey, Pennsylvania, and Federal Donuts and Chicken with 11 units and growing strong based out of Philadelphia, PA.
You know, I really want to dig into this. There's 3 franchises that you're really partnering with right now. I want to start with this theme of what a franchisor needs to look like in the next decade around like org design, cross-functional alignment, tech, franchisee support. You have operated almost every seat inside the franchisor, from licensing to ops to brand to tech. So when you look at the industry today, what does, quote, the modern franchisor actually need to look like?
It's such a good question. And I think obviously there are different answers depending on both the size of the brand and the life cycle of the brand.
Yeah.
Startups, while often smaller, need sometimes twice the amount of work and effort and process that some of the larger brands do. But here's what I would say is a general, it's all about kind of efficiency in support is how we've looked at the business. And so at the end of the day, the landscape for every industry, specifically restaurants and hospitality, it changes constantly. Whether it's supply chain availability, cost of goods, the way we market, how we communicate with the consumer changes so fast that it's almost impossible to consistently react. And so finding ways within a franchise organization to help our franchisees navigate those changes in an efficient way, right? You can't touch every franchisee every day. We can't be in a million places at once, or we'd have 80 people teams for 11 units. And so what it's really about, at least for us, is finding efficiencies. So how can we scale the subject matter expertise that we have at the brand level by using things like technology, by using things like a different way that we approach multi-unit operators versus single unit operators. So I would say peeling back the layers of the onion from a business perspective and recognizing that one size fits all does not fit all, and that you really have to figure out how to scale in a way that affects the franchisee positively every single day.
So is that what you think has maybe changed over the last several years? It's almost like it does feel like the world's moving faster, things are changing faster. It's very unpredictable to know what's going to happen with food costs over the next 6 months versus any changes in the administration versus any changes in just kind of your local or regional needs. And so it almost feels like the sort of modern franchisor just needs to be more agile and willing to adjust and willing to change.
Yeah. And I will say that is where I think my cross-functional experience
Mm.
has come in the most handy. When things like, I don't want to bring up the tariff conversation, right? But when things like that start to
It's a
affect
change though, right? Yeah.
in real time, right?
Yeah.
Today it's one thing, tomorrow it's something else, but change in any system doesn't really happen that fast. And
Mm.
so for me, understanding how if we do something on the marketing side, this is how it affects operations. If we make a product change on the supply chain side, here's what we need to do to effectively roll that out. I think really as leaders in this business, kind of pulling ourselves out and looking down at the business as a whole instead of kind of getting siloed in departments and making those changes, that's what will help the modern day franchisor and will in effect help the franchisee, which is what we all get up in the morning for.
You in particular have lived this tension between franchise sales and franchise ops, arguably more than most. Most kind of stay in their lane, right? So when does that relationship between franchise sales and franchise operations, when does it work really beautifully? And when does it go sideways? And maybe to put it another way, for, what's really a moment for you in your career that kind of shaped how you think about that partnership now?
First I'll say I'm never good at staying in my lane. Which is
maybe for better or for worse. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Maybe a good and bad thing, depending on how you ask. But, I think there's the development side of the business and the operations side of the business. And I don't want to say butt heads because it makes it seem adversarial, but sometimes
that's why I use tension. Yeah. There's something. Right? Yeah.
Franchise sales they're looking to hit budget numbers. They're looking to grow unit count. We've got to get MUTA signed. We've got to look at territory. And on the operations side and the procurement side, we're saying, hey, hold on. How much experience does this potential franchisee have? Or, hey, this is an area where you may want to sell something, but I don't have any other locations there. And so it makes distribution and brand awareness and marketing difficult. I will say my counterpart on the NewSpring side, Eric, has an operations background. We've worked together at 2 companies. It's been really lovely to kind of see us both play both sides and say, yes, develop. Yes, run as fast as we can on kind of growth and unit count and bringing franchisees in. But it has to go through the filter of, is this the right cultural fit for our system? Can we support this franchisee, both operations, marketing, and supply chain? And then what you get out of that is a stronger system. And so I've always felt strongly that operations needs to have a seat at the franchise approval table before that franchisee joins the system, because I think we really understand what happens after the check clears.
Well, what's also unique about your umbrella is you have more mature franchisees, but you also have brands that are really emerging. Federal Donuts is less than 20 units right now and growing. So maybe just staying on the emerging franchisor side, what's one structural change, just one, that you think really kind of instantly makes that relationship between development and operations just healthier? Knowing that it sounds like you have a healthy relationship now, like what's the thing that made it healthy besides the fact that you work together?
Yeah, fair. And this is actually back to kind of when I was with Saladworks. It was a change we made then to really have someone that is the link between onboarding and opening. So we have a position at all brands, Federal, Duck Donuts, and Great Harvest, that is an onboarding specialist. So someone that takes the franchisee from the moment they sign that agreement through the 8,672 things they've got to do until they turn the key on opening day and get their location open. And so what that both allows and forces us to do is recognize that every step in that process, they're all linked. So making decisions on the development side inevitably affect the operations, marketing, supply chain side. And that person really acts as kind of the fiber that connects those departments, and they see it from both sides. And so Eric and I, as an example, are able to kind of pass down that cross-functional vision to other team members who help franchisees.
I actually want to shift gears a little bit because I think you also have this really unique perspective. You're very tech forward. You've led ops at a tech company before returning to franchising. You have this unique perspective of running a SaaS organization. And I would imagine that it's informed your expectations for what franchisor systems and processes actually should look like. So I'm curious to hear, where do franchisors today still operate too manually?
I think I've seen both. I've seen franchisors that have so much tech debt because they get so excited about new systems, and then they end up with all these systems and processes that are oftentimes costly, that either cost the franchisor or the franchisee some sort of software as a service monthly recurring charge.
Without real ROI, probably.
Correct. And so much of that ROI is hard to track until you're really in it, which is why due diligence, contract negotiation, right, terms, all of those things are important. But then I will say on the other side of it, I feel like, and look, AI is such a huge part of how businesses look at what they do every single day. But in my personal opinion, it can't just be AI. It can't just be tech. And maybe this is kind of my operations bias coming through, but I'll give you an example. We partnered with a company called Quantive, and what they're doing is really, they are not only our data warehouse, but they're using all the data from POS, from loyalty, from weather, everything. And there is an AI engine that sits on top of that data warehouse. It has a name. His name is Roger. And I can ask Roger insights about a location. What are optimal hours of operation? Are there any parts of the day that we feel like are labor light or labor heavy? The insights are unreal, and they happen so much faster. A year ago, even that kind of information would have taken me a week. I would have poured over POS data and tried to layer in loyalty information. And in 5 minutes with an email to my buddy Roger, I have all these insights. I think where people run into a problem is it stops there. How do I make those insights actionable? And I think that's where like an in-person operations team, really, that's where they shine. And so taking this heavy tech, heavy AI information and saying, now, how do I utilize this to help my franchisee who's either running multiple units or is an owner operator standing on the line every day? And so how do I pull these insights out and really shape what the business does every single day? That's how I think tech really has the ability to change the way we do things. Not that, it's faster or that we can replace things with it, but really that it gives our in-person teams the insight they need to make our franchisees more successful.
I love that mentality. It's a lot of how we see the world at Opus too. It's like you have to take insight out of the, proverbially speaking, but like the outside of the four walls of the software, and it has to lead to behavior change. And that is human, period. And so you have to actually, to use your words, to make it actionable, there has to be, a kind of cultural element in place that is getting people excited and interested to apply whatever knowledge they have and sort of activate it. So I love that way of thinking. And frankly, I think that reflects a sort of modern view of the franchise as well. It's almost like the last, specifically 5 years, with the tech boom in restaurants, there was like this excitement about tech, the tech fees emerged, all of that. Yep. And now everyone's saying wait, what's going on? Like, we have
Right.
all this
What do
stuff
we
and it's
need?
not actually, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And look, you obviously were Opus is one of the reasons that you and I know each other. And so I will say it was part of what excited me most about the platform, which was there were parts of the Opus platform that would allow me to be more efficient in creating things like training documents and process manuals. And those are things that would take a human longer.
Yeah.
But then it's like, how does that really work when we get down to the hourly employee, the part-time team member who's there maybe 4 hours a week because they're going to school? Those are the actionable sides of that. So I've worked really hard, candidly, with all three brands over the last few months to say, what tech do we have that we can use to make our people more efficient? Not
Right,
to,
right.
not to replace process, but how do we give them the time back to have across the counter conversations that could really help shape franchisees?
That actually kind of rounds out something I really wanted to talk to you about, which is this relationship with PE too. So, like, you're obviously spending time with on the franchisee side, but Great Harvest is now a part of a private equity portfolio. PE has a reputation, sometimes fair, sometimes not,
There.
for changing, quote, franchisor, or changing the brand. So, from your vantage point, what do you think actually changes when a brand becomes PE backed? Like, what becomes clearer, what becomes more disciplined, and maybe what falls apart?
Discipline is a really good word. I think
Mm.
one of the things that NewSpring has done and really I've worked on really diligently is what is the brand's North Star, and not just who they are as a brand, but what is the investment thesis under which that private equity firm invested in or purchased a brand? What does the 5-year roadmap look like? How do we get there? And then what are the strategic initiatives that get us to that North Star? Branding, consumer, supply chain, new product development, technology, operational aptitude. And then what structure do I need to support those initiatives that then leads to my North Star? And then how much money do I need to get there from a
Sure.
budgeting perspective? And so we spent a lot of time at all of the brands kind of saying, okay, what does the roadmap look like? And then how do we get there? And I think then everybody's kind of in the canoe rowing together at the same time in the same direction, which
Mhm.
is really, if private equity does it right, what they bring to the table. They have a level of expertise on direction and strategy and brand efficiency that can really take what is the foundation of a brand,
Right. What's working? Yeah.
and help it grow. And that's caused us to look at, what technology systems are we using? How can we be more efficient? There's huge, I'll give you an example. If we sign a contract, right? We just partnered with Toast
Hmm.
across all three brands from a POS perspective. We signed one agreement. The name at the top is different for each brand, but we had one attorney review one agreement. And so there's a real connectivity and an efficiency in using the other brands to say, how do we scale ourselves? And so I think that's been the most positive part about it. I would
Well,
say,
and I feel like you're mentioning this only because, and maybe like for people listening who maybe don't realize why that's such a big thing, the one contract is that historically, in a less connected organization, operators might be signing their own contracts or signing a new agreement as they expand. Is that where you're getting at? It's like you actually, the benefit of PE backed is like it's a forcing function to say, not only where can we find efficiencies day to day, but just where can we find efficiencies in our infrastructure and our contracting.
100%. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
if one brand has an amazing relationship with a vendor that they're already working with and have success and have proven an ROI and are getting franchisee buy-in, you really cut out the entire kind of legacy RFP process. It doesn't mean do your due diligence. It just means leverage your other brand partners to do it instead of starting from scratch.
That's interesting. Do you feel like the RFP is going away?
I think the length of time that some RFPs take and the really formalized part of the process, I think some of that is leaving. I think the world is just moving too fast to say, I'm going to look at an LMS and 6 months from now, after I've fit into my schedule, 17 meetings, narrowed down to 3, send each of those 3 companies through an official RFP process, look at the contract. My whole business could change in that period.
Yes.
So I think there's something to be said for, speed to market and being agile and leveraging relationships that other brands have. And look, that doesn't have to be PE backed. You can go to any conference and find a brand partner and say, what have you done and why is it working? And so the idea that we can leverage one another in this industry, I think will start to really change that formalized process.
Yeah. One of the benefits of just like a more interconnected world, there's pros and cons, but in this case, you can get more information faster about vendors almost.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Makes sense. So let's talk about you, Jenna, as we wrap up this conversation. So it's pretty incredible just how cross-functional your journey has been. And I would imagine really just shaped your point of view on franchise leadership. I want to talk about Saladworks for a minute and the depth of time that you spent there. And I'd really like to know what it gave you. It's so rare to like be in a role for that long. It was 14 years?
Almost 15 years.
Okay, almost 15 years.
Mhm.
What did the depth of your time at Saladworks give you about the business or about yourself that you may not have discovered through shorter periods in other roles?
I could talk about this all day. I loved my time at Saladworks so much. I love still kind of following the brand. I'm an avid consumer. There's still something orange in almost every room of my house. But I will say a couple things. One, the cross-functional experience was enormous for me. Recognizing things like the consumer should always have the head seat at the table as you go through your journey was something I don't know that I would have had the same perspective on had I been at a few different companies. I started at Saladworks as a business coach. I was running and supporting individual locations. And so as I changed roles there, it all came from this perspective of kind of standing on the other side of the salad case, talking to a consumer and finding out what they wanted from the brand. And so that consumer vision, I would say, changed everything I did along the way. It was just, I'm rolling out something from a marketing perspective. How does that fit in the location? Where are things when we were working on redesigning the location, we knew the flow of the consumer, right? I had stood on the other side. And so I could walk that journey myself, having seen it. And it changed the way we laid the store out. It changed the way that we communicated with the consumer. It changed the tech that we did, the loyalty focus. You name it, kind of that. I would say like the consumer and I linked arms very early in my tenure there. And they were with me through that whole journey. And then I will say, I value grit and I value kind of a lust for learning almost above all else as I'm building teams of the future. Yes, there's subject matter expertise. Yes, there is kind of educational pedigree and professionalism and all of those things. But my journey at Saladworks was because I had leaders that said, hey, try this. See if you can figure this out. because you're an operator, because you've been in marketing, because you've sold franchises. And so that idea that I would kind of dig in and say, let me learn the business from the inside before, as a leader, I attempt to shape that business and how it moves forward.
Mm.
It's something I value so much in my professional career now.
You're speaking my language. I'm such a nerd for range. And I feel like we have spent too much time in society like really like overvaluing the 10,000 hours, overvaluing, you need to be great at something rather than, in order to be great, you need to be good and interested in multiple things. Some of our most successful employees at Opus are the people who step up and say, I'd like to try this. Can I? It's like that to use your words, like the thirst for knowledge, the curiosity that actually builds a very different kind of muscle. And it's not range in and of itself, and a willingness to have it is really a skill. And so I'm curious, like, has that always been who you are? Are you always in your personal life? Are you always someone who's like, I just like to do and know a lot of different things?
I would say my father is the exact same way, and that's probably where a lot of that comes from. He's in the food business as well. But yeah, I've always I don't like things I don't understand, whatever it is. And so when I don't know something, my natural instinct is to like dig into it as much as I can. I say, see fire, run towards fire. That is a little bit of my motto. If there is something that I think needs fixing, I want to learn how we got there and how
Mm.
we get out and how we don't maybe make those mistakes again. And it's served me so well and I enjoy it. I'm like one of those people that I love what I do so much. I love working with franchisees so much. I love operations. I love being in the store, right? I'm first to like jump in if I can. And so I'm one of the lucky ones.
Well, and that actually makes me wonder how you make decisions. Are you a quick decision maker, or like what's if you're running into the fire all the time, does that manifest in the same way when you make decisions, or are you more methodical?
Oh, 100% I'm a quick decision maker. I really like data. And so I want to be fact based, right? I have a really solid, in my opinion, gut instinct at this point, having spent decades in the business. But I like it to be fact based because I think the days of we're doing it because we always did it that way, or we're doing it because someone in the C suite felt like that was the right thing. I think those days are over. I think we just have to act more responsibly. And so, yes, I am a quick decision maker. I will say that I've learned over the years to balance that out with people in the organization that are not so quick, sometimes in a good way, so that they'll say like, hey, hold on for a second. This one needs a little bit more of our attention. Let's take another day, a week, a month, whatever it is,
Sure.
and make sure that we get to the right spot. I say a lot, like, I don't want to smoke my own exhaust and just kind of sit in a room and say, oh, I'm going to make all these decisions because I've been in the business so long. The team that has linked arms with me and the other members of the executive team, my expectation is they are constantly interjecting their opinion, asking questions, pushing back so that we do get to all the right places.
I want to bring something up. I don't always bring this up to female executives because my own personal feeling just about being a woman in a leadership role is like, yeah, of course I like. Why are we even questioning this? but just talking about you a little bit, I actually think it's appropriate to bring this up. Being a woman at an executive level in franchising still isn't the norm. You obviously are in this like incredible, like far-reaching role. I really would like to know, what, or maybe it hasn't. How has that, being a woman in a C-suite role, how has that really shaped either how you lead or how you design organizations?
Yeah. I love diversity in thought and thinking, and whether that is background, male, female. I think that your executive team, your leadership team, and candidly, the team as a whole should be reflective of your consumer base. And that
Mm,
consumer base is diverse. And so I've never really, like you, I've never really looked at it like I am a woman in an executive role, right? Like I'm just an executive. I'm a brand steward is what I am. But I am very careful to make sure that the teams kind of in the next generation of brand leaders have a voice. And so whether it's a woman, whether it's someone who's younger, whether it's a person of color, right? I want to make sure that there's absolutely a level playing field for any one of those people to get to where they have a seat at the table to make decisions.
mhm.
And so, we talked a little bit earlier about kind of my desire to learn things. I have a member of my team and she's younger, and we were working on something legal separate in the brand. So I shot her a copy of it and said, hey, during our next one-on-one, I don't think this is something you've ever been exposed to in your career. Let's talk through this so
Mm.
that I can give you some of the insight so that you understand this whole business a little differently. And so I take that responsibility to kind of give future leaders that same opportunity of cross-functional leadership and knowledge of the business. I feel like that's a huge part of my job, of my commitment, both to brands and to the industry, is just
Sure. Yeah.
kind of pay that forward.
There's something you just said right now, and it's a nice way to close this before we go into the lightning round, which is my favorite part of this conversation is there is like a subtlety in your language. You said, I want them to have a seat at the table. I want them to have a voice instead of, which I think sometimes we hear, and I agree, that there's the easiest way to think about this is, well, I want my employee base to reflect my consumer base so that like we grow and we have more empathy for that experience.
Yep.
But the language you didn't use is, I want to give them a voice, because there's a difference, right? Of like, well, yeah, they have a voice. I just, and to use your words again, like I need to give them a seat at the table and some runway to use it. And, but also give them some guidance, thus the term runway to like help them not go off the rails. And I really appreciate that. I think like that's a misunderstood or way of seeing the world, that like there is a difference between giving someone a voice and having a voice, but just giving them a seat at the table,
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jenna, this has been a well-rounded conversation. I want to end it with our lightning round. Listeners love this. It's basically only a couple of minutes long, and I'm going to ask you a handful of questions and just try to answer them as quickly as you can, just a couple of words, so people can get a glimpse of who you are. So we'll start with number one, which is, what was your first job?
Oh, I worked in the summer at a hot dog food truck.
Nice. So you've always been in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know it then, but I feel like that's it. That was my intro.
What's your, particularly interested in this, what's your go-to donut flavor?
Ooh, go-to donut flavor is probably cinnamon sugar.
All right. What's a restaurant trend or food trend that you're completely over?
Ooh. Huge portions. I'm not a big like family style. I don't want all these things everywhere. I like little plates because I like variety. So I like to try all the things.
Mm. What is an underrated, and you can't say one of your brands, what is an underrated franchisor brand and why?
Ooh. Underrated franchisor brand. I'm gonna go to some of the older brands because I love a good legacy brand, right? So I'm gonna talk about like an Annie Ann's,
Mm.
so a brand that look how long they've been around. And I really respect so much of that, right? Not everybody talks about them as much, I think, as they did before. And especially with things like, enclosed shopping malls and the implosion of that entire segment of our real estate chain. The fact that brands like that have been able to like pivot and adapt, it like speaks my language.
What leadership skill are you personally going back to basics on right now?
Research.
What do you mean?
I mean, utilizing the information I have, right? Kind of with decision making. I like to look at tech. I like to look at, I'm a big fan of like, let me go back to the FDD and the franchise agreement and like refresh the language in here so that I take a look at it. And so I want to make sure that I kind of stay grounded in fact, in black and white information. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes we have to like curve around those really straight lines, but I at least like to know what they are.
So to finish things off, Jenna, if you could give your 25-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, keep going.
Mm.
Keep going, right? I mean, there were moments in my career where I was like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right role? I just took on something that I'm not sure I know how to do. And I'd love to say, like, you got it. Like, don't worry. Just like learn more, study harder, look at people around you and ask a million questions, and the end result will be exactly what I wanted it to be.
Wonderful way to end our conversation. Jenna, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.